Welcome back everyone, John Pan here with another video. Today we're going to be going over this Reddit post that I found on our Limbus company. It's called a detailed breakdown of the problems I have with Limbus company. It's posted by an enemy Mir. This person has gotten to Battle Pass level 30, has played quite a lot about the game, but also apparently is a professional in field of game development, as this person has worked on Wargroove by Chucklefish and Pathway by Robotality. User enemy Mir. So we're gonna jump right into it. I've also done some coding in the past before, and I can tell you it's not easy to make games. So we're gonna react to this, but not only react to this, I'll give you guys my impressions as well, because overall she has a pretty good article. But I'm not gonna read it, someone else is gonna read it. By someone, I mean something.
User interface issues. Inability to tell at a glance what an identity is good for. You have to click through each and every skill of an identity to see what damage types it does and what sins it generates. It takes more clicks still to see its ego at each tier and what they need. This means that party optimization is very difficult to do within Limbus company itself, as using external websites to look up basic information is faster and more efficient than looking up that exact same information at the party building screen. This loss of time makes party building a much higher wall than it needs to be, and I don't believe it's a hard fix to do. When on the identity selection screen for a specific character, identities should have an inspect button that brings up details as a pop-out window. A simple showing of each skill and passive with its name, color, and damage type, sin requirement would suffice, and can be condensed into a very small space effectively. There is ample UI space to attach this button on mobile and PC both, as the identity selection screen, making a toggle button very easy to use. Ego can be managed the same way on the main screen, as there is ample room on each card to fit the names of all 5 ego, and ego loadout cards already exist on the ego page and in mirror dungeons. Having a button to switch out the identity portrait card for the ego loadout would work extremely well and would use very little UI space, which as stated before, is available for use.
So I understand where this person's coming from. Yeah, the UI is a bit lacking. It could be more descriptive, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be. If you think about this like Pokemon is essentially what this is. We have 12 Pokemons in our loadout, and we get to pick 6 or 5 at once to play with. Do we have to have it so that it tells us everything? I mean, it'd be nice, but if you treat it like Pokemon, not really. In Pokemon, you have 6 Pokemons, you know what Pokemons there are. Eventually, you get to know what their skill sets are like. Obviously, with each character, we have different iterations with their identities, but it doesn't matter. Obviously, it's hard to juggle 6 units. Whatever, we're adults, we can juggle like 25 in our head, not a big deal. As for example, right now with Heathcliff, I already know, base Heathcliff, he's got envy skills, wrath skills, lust skill, his ego is upheaval, it does damage, gives him attack power up, like stuff like that. If you play the game enough and use the characters enough, like you'll know what it is, and eventually you'll just be able to build a team comp around what you already know. And if you do have to, search up something, just treat it like Pokemon. Go into the menu, open up your Pokemon, go into their status, open their status. If you really want to check their power, jump into their power, read their power, see what it does. Works kind of the same. Yeah, it's a little bit annoying, but I mean, we've already been doing that since Pokemon, so not that big of a deal, but kind of understand where this person's coming from.
Having a button to switch out the identity portrait card for the ego loadout would work extremely well and would use very little UI space, which as stated before, is available for use. Exchanging lunacy for enkephalon and exchanging enkephalon for modules should have their positions swapped on the UI. Enkephalon conversion to modules is a core gameplay mechanic that is required to complete Chapter 1 and participate in a large portion of the game's current and future content. Exchanging lunacy for enkephalon is something that a minority of the player base will do some of the time. This saves a click. However, beyond that, multiple people I know, myself included, have made the mistake while in a rush to create modules and autopiloted into it. Human error is what it is, but it would take one small change to prevent it. Checking.
Yes, indeed. Obviously, when you're converting enkephalon to enkephalon module, you have to click over to the third tab in order to be able to convert. And the first tab requires lunacy, but even my first time using it, I understood that the first one uses lunacy, the last one uses actual enkephalon. So yes, it's human error. Don't be lazy, just read. I don't know what to tell you guys. It's a gacha. I don't think the game forces you to do it. If that's just the UI, that's just how the UI is. It's just one of those situations where we're gonna have to live with it. I mean, it would be nice as a quality of change, but understandable, kind of annoying, but also kind of smart if Project Moon is trying to get us to accidentally spend lunacy on stamina, but justifiable, but not that big of an issue. Just read and don't be on autopilot.
Checking ego progress in combat is slow. This is another issue that is easily solved with one input. Currently, to check ego progress, you need to hold down on a character, then click each ego individually, then repeat for every character. This requires a lot of inputs to acquire basic information until you have memorized the cost of every ego on your team, which can be as high as 25 or even 30 if 6-man parties come back. That is a lot of details to memorize and cross-reference. We have a chart of every sin resource we have saved up located on the side of the screen, and on the opposite side of the screen, there is an array of passives, and a button to bring them out. The same UI could be used to array all of the player's ego, with the same method of bringing up details. Clicking the button simply pops out a tray of all of the ego by name, and clicking them brings out the tooltip and cost requirements, which can then be stored away after. While 25 is a lot more than 12, having them pop out from both sides of the screen would alleviate this problem. Combat issues.
So, this is an interesting take. I mean, it makes sense that you probably want things to be a little bit more descriptive, so that way you can see, how many affinities you have for resources and what you stocked up and how much stockpile you have and how much you can use. But I find that right now the UI, it kind of does what it has to do. If I, say for example, use Rodion's Eagle and all of a sudden I can no longer use Body Sack from Heathcliff, that's fine. Like, the UI dims its ego, so that means, oh, I've used some resources in this ego. No, so therefore I can't use my resources in this other ego. Which is fine. Not a big deal. I mean, I understand it'd be nice to track your ego and be able to see where all your affinities at, what ego uses what, so how much do I need to stockpile to be able to have like a crazy one-turn ego chain. But honestly, realistically, it's just one of those things where it would be nice, but it's not game breaking. Yeah, it takes a few more clicks to get all the information you need, and sometimes it's hard to remember how many resources you do need when you're building up ego. But in reality, when I'm playing the game, I'm not trying to focus my build around ego, because the combat is more focused on winning your clashes with the skills that you have available. And as a result, you'll gain resources, affinities for your ego. That's just kind of how it plays right now. I don't actively try to go out of my way to do ego spamming, but I can see where this is coming from, but not that big of an issue.
Combat issues. Let us use the abnormality combat system in all fights. I completely understand the purpose and value of the chain system. It is time efficient and makes it very easy to have dramatic battles with a lot going on screen at once. It makes sense that this is what you want to introduce players to starting out, as it does not ask too much of them and allows for spectacle unlike that in other games. It's telling that there are mods to make this happen in Library of Ruina, which does use Limbus abnormality combat system as its only system. However, it has the side effect of making players feel like they do not have control over situations when they understand the game better. Few things feel worse than losing a clash you had high odds to win, getting staggered, and then next turn, being unable to do anything to save the character who is now getting slaughtered. This is brought into sharp relief by the abnormality system, which does allow you to save characters from such events. This is not to say the chain needs to be removed, or that the very idea of it is problematic. Rather, there exists UI and mechanical space to allow for both. By selecting and dragging the chain, just as you are taught in the tutorial, the system can continue to have the existing combat mechanics unaltered. Instead, by clicking on individual abilities over the ball of chains, you should be allowed to manually select targets. This would require neither additional UI assets, nor additional mechanics to be added to the human combat system, as everything can simply be taken from the abnormality combat system without removing any content. Too many.
So, this makes sense. I think the biggest issue that I had when playing this game, and also my friend, was that human battles ended up being harder than abnormality battles because you just don't have control. Human battles would be so much easier if you had control, because a prime example is stage 3-4. The police officers heal, and they heal more at less than 50% HP. So ideally, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to burst one officer down quickly. Like, that is ideally what you really want to be able to do. However, that's impossible to do because all your characters are going based off of speed and they're going in order, Unga Bunga style. So it really feels bad when you understand how the game works and you don't have control over it. That being said, obviously, truthfully speaking, all battles should just run as a abnormality battle. I mean, you can still have the linking system on, obviously, as she said, but truthfully speaking, just leave the win rate on. That's like an auto battle function. But if people actually want to, like, big brain 5 head their moves, just let them drag it as an abnormality battle. Problem solved. Easy. Just do it like that.
Too many single count status effects apply same turn. Abilities such as Tremor and Paralyze, which is bugged, typically apply on the same turn they're inflicted. This means that they will fade at the end of the turn. Most enemies possess a single action, and individual abnormality limbs can often have their own status counter. This means that Paralyze will fade before it can do anything unless multiple people attack a single action, which is a rarity in human combat, and often extremely inefficient in abnormality combat. This makes Tremor nigh useless in human fights, as you cannot get another unit in to even apply count, and bursting a single unit of Tremor does functionally nothing. When coupled with the existing human combat system, this makes status builds extremely inefficient and problematic for many statuses, as they simply will not be interacted with before they fade unless the player has already secured victory through action economy. The current iteration.
This makes sense. This is an issue that I also have a problem with. Stuff like Paralyze, it applies on the turn of, and there are only a select few characters, if maybe only one, that applies the effect next turn. Paralyze does me no good on the turn I apply it because I've won the clash, and then I apply Paralyze. But that just means that unless the unit has another skill lined up, this is going to be useless. And even in a boss battle, it works the same. This only really is helpful in abnormality battles if Paralyze affected all the limbs of the boss, because I don't think right now that's how it works. At the moment, I feel like because of how status effect works in abnormality battle and also human battles, statuses like Tremor and Paralyze, which is very specific to a body part or unit, are niche unless we can trigger it. Ideally, status effects like Tremor, Bleed, Paralyze, all of that fun shenanigans should be stated as applied at the start of next turn. If you do that for all of your statuses, it would keep everything consistent, and I feel like that way we'll be able to just stack up status effects better. And not only that though, it should realistically be when the status effect is applied, it should fall off at the end of next turn. That to me makes the most sense, because if I want to apply like Paralyze or not even Paralyze, just say for example Tremor for a turn, I Tremor them, next turn they should have Tremor, and if I don't Tremor them again, the stacks should fall off. But if I do Tremor them again, it should continue to stack up until I can't Tremor them. However, this is definitely something that should be looked at, should be changed. I do want status effects to be a little bit better, especially like Tremor and Paralyze. But currently right now, it feels really bad. Unless you're using LCCB Ishmael. She can apply Tremor, no problem with her Quake rounds. But outside of that, everyone just kind of sucks at it. And I also did realize that, yeah, Tremor does nothing. You can't really pop Tremor, which is really weird. But that's a totally different problem, which we'll go back some other time.
The current iteration of human combat invalidates many status effects. Because we cannot control targeting, we cannot control any combo-centric interactions, such as Fanatic, Rupture, Tremor, or Burn. Many burn abilities rely on the target already having some measure of burn to trigger a greater effect. Tremor is reliant on triggering a burst to have any effect, and Rupture is reliant on stacking count to make it more than a small flat damage bonus and to trigger abilities such as Eviscerate's damage bonus. As there is no way to control or assign targeting, this means that status combos, which many statuses are built around, are not currently possible in human combat, encouraging a focus on brute force over all other options. When coupled with the above-listed focus on single count inflictions, most statuses will fade before they're even interacted with, preventing these combos from starting. It simply does not feel good to have a combo of effects that fails because of core mechanics, and reduces many status effects to mere fluff with minimal impact. Progression.
So, this is kind of what I was talking about in the top. Currently right now, there's a lot of cool status effects in the game. It's just that you really can't build up those status effects properly to be able to use it because of the combination of human battle and abnormality battle. In human battles, you really can't build up status effects because everyone is attacking just randomly and at speed. The second thing is in abnormality battle, you can't really build up your status effect high enough to make the counts trigger. If you're doing a bleed build, at most you might be able to get a stack of 1 plus 6 or a stack of 2 to 6, and you do 12 damage, and then your stacks fall off for bleed. Burn, same thing. You're able to get the burn up to like say 3 damage, but because you don't apply burn count on it, the burn falls off really quickly. It's just one of those things where if you get unlucky, which you most likely will, and you don't get the burn cards you need, the bleed cards you need, and if you can't extend those buffs or those debuffs, it's just gonna fall off and it's just completely irrelevant. So currently right now, the game doesn't do a good job of allowing us to play with debuffs. There is a lot of potential. There just needs to be some fixes where we can consistently be able to apply buffs. I'm not saying make it so that, the debuffs stay for like 3-4 turns, but I'm just saying, give us an extra turn and give us some more options to be able to apply debuffs like that.
Progression. There is no long-term investment source for enkephalon. The current level cap is 30. This will almost certainly rise. However, even if it does, once a character is max level, they are functionally finished, and it is possible to stockpile EXP tickets in large quantities. Very large quantities. Excessively large, as I have passed 200 gold tickets before I decided to just burn them on maxing a bunch of characters. While modules are a place to spend enkephalon, they are beholden to the same issue. A character quickly has their power maximized. This means that the only place to spend these resources, be it experience or thread, is on new characters. This is a problem, as every team has a clear completion goal. Right now, a team of level 30, up to 3 characters that works well in all content is functionally finished, and the player no longer has anywhere to spend enkephalon that will improve their account's performance. Instead, resources from Luxcavations, Battle Pass progress, and otherwise will stockpile unspent. This means that should a new identity come out that a player wants, they can spend this backfilled resource pile to immediately max it out. The only way to prevent this from happening is to release content in such quantity that players cannot manage to keep up. However, in order for players to buy into this, said content would actually need to be good enough to warrant switching from existing tactics to it. This is power creep by design, and that is not good for the long-term health of the game. The consequences of players not doing this is that they will not have a place to spend enkephalon at all, and thus little incentive to play beyond the inherent enjoyment of content, which leaves the game's playtime completely beholden to the release of story content, which nobody can possibly keep up with, as even the largest games such as Final Fantasy XIV, Genshin Impact, World of Warcraft, Warframe, Destiny or otherwise, cannot produce enough high-quality single playthrough content fast enough to maintain a live service model. A long-term method of investing enkephalon into individual characters and identities for minuscule gains would aid in this, as resources spent on making marginal, mathematically irrelevant improvements to characters would be enkephalon spent on something besides stockpiling future resources, and would give a tangible reward in the moment. Encouraging players to play often is core to a successful live service, as engagement time directly translates to money. The current...
This is an interesting take. I don't 100% fully agree with it because, yes, it's true. If you've played the game as hard as this person and have capped yourself at level 30, then yeah, you're at the state of the game where, you're maxed out and your enkephalon's kind of going to waste. But even then, not really. You can always convert that enkephalon to modules. And yes, I understand that if you're so maxed out, everything is maxed out, you have nothing else to spend your enkephalon on, that's fine, that's great. Just stockpile your enkephalon for when the next event comes out. I'm sure there's going to be events in the future like Hell's Chicken where you're going to have to use your enkephalon modules to do stuff with. And if you stockpile a large amount, you'll just be able to produce, or you'll be able to go through content longer and faster. I wouldn't say faster, but you'll be able to go through content with more stamina, which I think is fine because currently right now the game's still new. It's not going to have a lot of content. If this was like a 2-year-old game, a 1-year-old game, and if you decide to try to blaze your way through and catch up to all the content, there's just no way. Like even right now, Genshin Impact, if you decide to like start a new account today, you're going to have a ton of gameplay readily available, just going through quests, going through storylines, and that does not burn stamina. Obviously, you want to be able to use your stamina and get stronger, but I'm just saying, right now the game's really young. You're not going to supposed to be at that stage even. Because if you take a look at my account's like, what, level 15, 16, 17, something like that? And I've only been really doing the dailies, and honestly, I haven't been keeping up with all my dailies. I've just been kind of logging on, doing a mere dungeon, and that's just kind of it. I don't go crazy hard to max my battle pass. So I think as like a casual player, I think that's fine. Like the pacing of the game is just fine, and this is just without the content we have. So overall, I understand where this is coming from, but at the same time, I'd rather it be like this than the model of like Genshin Impact, where you have to farm egregiously to be able to get your units to a high level and high gear requirement. This is not the game for it. I don't want to have to spend 14, 15, 16 hour getting the right gear requirement, getting the right substats, rolling the right substats. That to me does not sound fun. So with how it is right now, being able to max your characters early on and being able to experiment and play with them, I think it's great. One thing that they can do is add like uptie 4 eventually, but that's down the road.
The current state of ego is overly punishing to new players and reduces the incentive to acquire new identities. Many identities do not possess the ability to fuel a character's baseline ego powers, save for the base ego. This is made worse by the current spread of ego sin affinities. Envy burn sources have become a community priority in team building due to only having one character who can efficiently utilize envy baseline without severe drawbacks. Heathcliff. Ego is a core part of the game's combat system, and not having access to it places the player at a severe disadvantage. Acquiring ego via gacha and battle pass is not a problem. It is good game design. However, as characters start with only one single ego option, and all others are locked to battle pass or gacha acquisition, this means that team building for new players is excessively restrictive. As using their shiny new gacha toys means giving up on the game's most dynamic and visually appealing attacks outright, or spending ages crafting a team that can work their abilities. Regardless of how many new ego are added to the battle pass or gacha, this will continue to be a problem. More free ego, particularly those that do not use any of the sins of a character's base identity, would both encourage the use of alternate options, and reduce the complexity of team building. This is already extremely visible on Gregor, who acquires the Legerdemain Zayan ego very early into the battle pass, which immediately opens up entirely new options for team building for Gregor. As such, I cannot help but feel that more free ego would actively encourage more use of the gacha as additional team options would be more readily usable. Limbus.
So, I think this makes sense, but I would disagree a little bit. It's kind of the same thing as just going back to Genshin. Realistically speaking, you actually never have to pull in Genshin to be able to clear its content. There's tons of people who've already made challenge runs where they essentially make a new account and play through it with only whatever the game gives them. And Project Moon is one of those situations. You could honestly clear the game with only the base characters, and that's fine. I do understand that egos definitely do open up team building, but you do get those eventually. And I'm pretty sure Project Moon is going to have those egos that are locked behind the battle passes be put in the standard banner eventually in the future, like 2-3 months down the road. So eventually, as long as you stay consistent with the game, you're eventually going to get those egos. The only time that I can see it being an issue is if there is certain content that require that specific ego to be able to clear. And that's when there's a problem. But as long as the game can be cleared with its base units and its free ego that you get from the battle pass, I think it's fine. Overall, I treat it like Genshin. It's PvE, like Arknight, PvE. You can beat it with 4-star units, 5-star units, stuff like that. You don't need the best units. It helps, but since it's PvE, doesn't really matter. It just speeds things up for you. Overall, just quality of life thing. Not that big of a deal in my opinion, because you can get those eventually, and the gacha rate pretty high. So honestly, getting egos, I wouldn't really worry too much about it, because at the end of the day, just having your base ego and just being able to team comp and build affinities around your team works way better. Knowledge is key here.
Limbus Company is moving towards a very peak and valley progression focus with long periods of little player progress. There is no meta progression currency, and experience, thread excavations are limited both per day, and in terms of how much you get out of them before you are simply doing prep work for future characters. Once players have a comfortable stockpile, there is no reason for them to engage in these fights beyond personal enjoyment. Which, while enjoyable for a time, repetition will set in eventually. Raising one's account level is currently the only source of meta progression, as it increases one's Enkerfallen stockpile size every time you do so. This is satisfying, but isn't enough on its own. This leaves unlocking identities and ego, which is tied to weekly lunacy gains, with nowhere to really use them on until a content drop. The railway is a good start, but only provides more resources that feed right back into this problem. To that end, I'd like to suggest adding ARN as a currency, as it is the existing money used in the city. A global currency acquired from all content in the game, that can be spent on all manner of things such as UI personalization or other minor things. This is a common idea that is even found in fighting games, where you can save up currency to buy window borders and portraits. Having something to work towards during the valleys in content that has value to the player beyond simply impacting combat would be a great use of limited development time for large games. I know I wouldn't mind grinding to modify the menu UI and skill UI to more closely fit my tastes. Queen of Hatred themed skill selection and Lou association bus please. Limbuscompany has a very large number of places where UI modification could work and a large number of things that could be added to the game for players to grind for, without impacting the core combat experience. Think about it, how many people would want to change out the mirror dungeon theme ATM for the themes from the story dungeons? Plenty, I'm sure.
Great feedback, honestly, with this situation. I can see the strife that will come across with it, which is once you've maxed out your account, there's nothing else to do. Honestly, the two quick fixes is either A, turn your bus, your Limbus, your HUD, into like a room decorator. Arknight has it where you have like a hub where you can, build your fallout shelter essentially, and there are specific rooms called dormitory where your units can chill, and you can decorate the room very similar this game. You can decorate your bus, put stuff in it. That's a potential. Second is mastery cosmetics. So let's just say you get, your character's mastery, like in League of Legends, to a certain rank, then, you get a nice skin, a new skin. So basically that means if you play like the base character long enough, or whatever requirements you need to it, they will unlock a new outfit. I think that'd be pretty cool. Just for the base characters though. They'll give people an incentive to play, make it maybe something astronomical, enormous, egregious, I don't know, but it'll give people a reason to play if you really want to give people a sense of progression. But honestly, I don't want the game to be bloated. I never want the game to go into the Genshin territory where we have to farm for gear, gotta min-max our stats. Like, that to me is not fun. That's just a chore. Like, that is just luck. It gives me Epic 7 vibes. I don't want to spend a ton of game just trying to get the best gear. That to me is not gameplay. It is gameplay, but it's just self-inflating gameplay.
Tutorial and information presentation. Please cover how coins work better in the tutorial. This is the major issue with the current state of the tutorial. People leave it not understanding how Limbuscompany's combat system works because they don't understand how coins operate. We've seen so many posts about this, which can be solved by simply walking the player through the steps of a clash and attack in real time. Faust sure does love talking, so it's not like there isn't room for it. Attack and defense, relationship with coin power isn't well explained. It took community testing to figure out how attack impacted coin rolls. This can be solved simply by having it say on the information walkthrough for identities. There's already a button for this, simply adding the text would do it. Stagger threshold values aren't given. With different characters having different stagger thresholds, and abilities modifying stagger thresholds in the middle of battle, we have to eyeball it. Ruiner gave us exact numbers. This can be fixed by simply adding it to the character's details page under HP, both inside and outside of combat. Stages do not tell us what damage types are good going in. Keeping some secrets from the player is fine. Having to restart K-Corp because of the severe need for blunt damage to win just feels like you got scammed out of your first run. Simply displaying somewhere, bring blunt, would help. This is already being done for upcoming content, and there is space to do it retroactively. Ego passives are not well taught. Ego passives stay active for the rest of the battle after they're first used. This is barely explained to the player at all, leading to a great deal of confusion, and can be easily taught in the tutorial via showing Faust's ennui passive modifying a dice roll. So, yeah. Big ol' college thesis essay of feedback. If you have read this far, please remember your daily sacrifice of 3 Clarks to Queen of Hatred. Time is running out.
So, a lot to cover here, but most of this makes a lot of sense. Coins aren't explained well. Sanity affects your coin toss, but only your first coin toss. Sanity affects it by a certain percentage for every 10 sanity you have. So it is note that it should be explained better. Attack and defense relationship with coin power is explained well, which is true. Even defense is not explained well, and defense isn't really a good option right now. So there is almost no reason, almost keyword, to defend. If the game makes defending better, explaining attack and defense relationship with combat will make a lot of sense. But right now, it's literally just unga bunga, bigger number wins, and hope you land heads. That is the generic gameplay. Stagger threshold values aren't given, which is true. You just kind of look at the HP, and once you've experienced it enough, if you get smacked hard enough and you see your low HP, you know you're getting staggered. So not a big deal. It'd be nice to see what the damage thresholds are, but when an attack is coming, it's either going to stagger you or not. And the UI is just there to show you it's happening. Stages do not tell what damage types are going in. So I kind of agree with this, but the only thing that I would say is you should go into the battle, and if you see an enemy, and let's just say you wipe, when you come out of it, the enemy information should be there. But for whatever the reason, if you go into the battle, you scoop, you go into the battle, you lose, the enemy information still shows as question mark, question mark, question mark. It doesn't tell you after you beat it, will it show its details. I wish that if you went into it, you saw the enemy, or the enemies that you did see, you should get their info on the stage selection, but personal take. Ego passes are not well taught. That's true. I did not realize that apparently the actives of your ego only activates after you use your ego. I always thought if you had your ego equipped, the passive was always guaranteed. That is not true. That definitely can be taught by Faust during the tutorial. Overall, I honestly think great post. Goes over a lot of things that I have issues with, but I can see how this person does. I think come from a game design background, because he's trying to really, make it better, the UI and everything better. But honestly, at the end of the day, it's one of those weird situations as a company. Do you want to spend time doing things that aren't going to make you money? That's always what a company is going to say. The biggest thing is if the game sucks, not good. Company's not going to make money. So you got to fix the big things like bugs. That always has to be a big one. Second is you want to release new content, release new characters, all of that. Currently, right now, a bad tutorial does turn off player, but that's what YouTube is for. This gives me Final Fantasy Brave Exvius kind of vibes, because Final Fantasy Brave Exvius also had a similar situation where the game doesn't do a good job of explaining its numbers, its calculations, like how do you figure that out. It took people to data mine the game to go into the code and figure out what the numbers do and how they work. And as a result, that allowed players to, build a community around it, share ideas, share information to then build, a cohesive guide for other people to play the game, which is kind of what I do. Am I the smartest in the game? Absolutely not. There are still a lot of things that either A, bug me, B, confuse me, or C, I just misunderstand them. So it is just one of those situations where as the game gets older with more information out there, it'll just be easier for beginners to figure that out. And generally speaking, nowadays people just go on YouTube and Google and they just figure out, what does this do? What is this style? How does this work? And, they get their answer quick and easy. So I'm not too worried about things not being explained well. I mean, it's nice to have it in the game, but realistically speaking, Google and YouTube and probably ChatGPT nowadays are your friend. Overall, those are my thoughts. Those are my opinions. What do you guys think? I think that this person does a great job covering a lot of the issues. Personally, a lot of the UI can be fixed and can be optimized, but I honestly think it's fine right now. Sure, it's a bit annoying, but all the information you can get, just treat this like Pokemon. It'll ease your mind a little bit more. If you treat this like Pokemon, you'll be fine. Just use those Pokemons long enough and you'll understand their ego, what they use, what their abilities are, what their passive is, and eventually you'll be able to build a team around all those fun stuff. So yeah, we have a Pokemon troop of 12 units. Have fun with them. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know down in the comment section down below. As always, if you want me to do more of these reaction videos, let me know. I currently like doing this because number one, it's simple. Number two, it's easy to do. Number three, people have a lot of great ideas that they just don't post on YouTube. Anyways, John Pano signing out. See you guys later. Bye for now.